Kirby Smart had some big news, Ryan Curley. Colby Young will be back with the Dogs. There was a lot of other stuff. Let's start with Colby Young coming back to Georgia. You could sort of start seeing this coming with the plea deal that he reached. That will matter for Georgia. Suddenly the wide receiver position looks different.
Yeah, I mean, very notable last season. Led the country in drops. It was a big problem. There were a lot of problems with Georgia's offense, but having a lack of reliability with the hands was an issue, and that's not something that you get with Colby Young. This is a big body target that can go up there and get the jump balls. They went and they got Noah Thomas from Texas A&M, another guy that's even taller and bigger than Colby Young. So they're loading up on receiver. They went and got Zachariah Branch. Yeah. They've got a couple freshmen that are pretty good and might claw their way onto the field. They still got guys like Nitro Tuggle and Sokovie White from this past freshman class.
Dylan Bell.
A point that was a position that ended up being an issue last year. At the moment, as spring football is starting today, looks like it's going to be a position of improvement, and you need that because you're going to have a first-time starting quarterback, whoever it ends up being, whether it's Gunnar Stockton or Ryan Puglisi, and you want reliability at one of the most important positions in football nowadays.
Well, the offense. Look, they've got challenges on offense that they've got to correct. I started with the wide receivers because you have Colby Young coming back to Georgia. And now, they've got to get the offensive line right. Monroe Freeling's not going to be there this spring, or he'll be very limited. There's 9 guys out. Off the top of my head, I can't remember everybody. Brett Thorson, Monroe Freeling, both Robinson running backs. So there's still some work to be done on that front. But the offensive line, they've got to figure out kind of what they're doing. Does Daniel Calhoun start coming in the middle? Is Bobo at center? I mean, Ernest Green, we talked to Ernest Green today. I mean, it's not like they don't have guys, but whatever you're putting in the soup, everything's got to mix together to where everything tastes good at the end of the day. And, that was the problem for Georgia last year is they didn't get it done on the offensive line, period.
No, I mean, I feel like I've said it over and over and over again. It was Georgia's worst rushing production year in nearly 20 seasons. You got to go back to 2006 for it to be as bad as it was this past season. Outside of the COVID year wasn't a full year, so I don't count that in terms of the production.
They ran it effectively in 2020. It wasn't unreal.
But similar numbers in 2020 to what they had this past season, and we're talking about them playing 14, 15 games. It just wasn't good enough, and it is one of those things where we don't really know if it's going to be better or worse, right? There's points on this team where you could say, hey, I think that'll be a little bit better. I think that'll probably drop off. But in terms of the running game, look, there were a lot of really good individual players on Georgia's offensive line. These guys are being tabbed as the most athletic offensive linemen in this upcoming draft. When we talk about guys like Tate Ratledge and Jared Wilson. But as a unit, it just didn't perform to the level that we've grown accustomed to seeing out of the Georgia Bulldog offense.
People.
They weren't, and they were getting beat at the line. And the Georgia running back room suffered a lot of injuries. Etienne was in and out of the lineup.
Offensive line.
Nate Frazier, true freshman, they're relying on him. He fumbles the ball a couple times, but still shows a lot of promise. Neither of the Robinsons, I call them the Robinsons, and they both just haven't been able to stay on the field in their short Georgia careers. So that is a thing that needs to get better, but because of the lack of experience with that offensive line and just not really knowing what you're getting behind Nate Frazier, you get Cash Jones, but they don't hand the ball off to Cash Jones. He had 14 carries last year.
Right.
So it's a spot, like I said, it needs to get better, but we don't know if it's going to be better or worse just because most of the offensive line hasn't played significant snaps. Micah Morris has played some significant snaps. Ernest Green.
They definitely have guys.
They've been trying to develop that depth, and that's why you see them rotate, right? Because they knew they were going to lose a lot of guys this year.
Well, they have 6. I think they had 6 different offensive line starting units this season, and the Kentucky, Alabama, Auburn was 3 different offensive line combinations 3 weeks in a row. I mean, that's challenging to so they could stay healthy. One thing that Kirby talked about today, they have 9. It was 9 guys, and that was kind of one of the lower numbers that Georgia's had on the injury front in some time as a program. So coming into a spring, so let's just see. And a lot of them are labrum repairs. That's not a giant deal. Kirby even talked about how he had that surgery back in the day in the 90s, in the dark ages. But Look, the challenge. Christian Miller's going to be out this, if my memory serves correct. He had the labrum. Was it? Yeah, it was Christian.
He was one of the guys.
Right.
So Joseph Jonah, a guy that is probably going to end up starting for Georgia, a guy that's going to be limited.
But like you're like, so some of this spring is going to be, you're going to have starters out, and you're going to have some guys that may be starters that it's their first time. This spring, it's always like this in the spring. I thought Kirby was pretty, chilled out today, which is not usually his style.
Yeah, I mean he's not always the most pleasant with us. And he was rather pleasant today, and was willing to answer questions and dodge questions the way that he usually does. But that's how it goes. He seemed excited, and
yeah, is that are we projecting? I mean, because I thought it was sort of the same way. I thought he felt good. What was the
yeah? I think you can get a vibe out of him sometimes. You can tell when he's frustrated. He seemed to be in a fairly good mood. And look, it's the first day of football, and they get to go out there and practice today. He's excited about that.
I'd be excited.
He knows that. Just as much as all of us, that this team has a lot of turnover, and it's going to be a very different football team. And him, more than anyone, is probably just anxious to see what he's got out of some of these players. Where, look, are any of these freshmen going to be guys? Are any of these transfers going to be guys the way that you brought them in to be? So
he was a little bit defiant today in a way. And here's what I say about that. I'm sorry about the camera angle. Y'all will live. He said, I'm excited where we are going into the spring. He said, we're built to last. We don't have to worry about a ton of change. He said, this league will chew you up and spit you out. It's brutal. He said, we are, he's talking about it's going to be challenging for everyone. I don't run from that. I want to see fire, talking about from the players. I want to see who cares about this game. And who was it that said today, I'm sorry, I can't remember which player it was that said, when I was 7 years old, I wasn't paid to play the game.
C.J. Allen. Someone was asking him about NIL and kind of the landscape of things. And it's something that Kirby referenced also earlier in the press conference, because he went first before the players and just talked about how they're not thinking about NIL the way that some of these other programs are. He wants people that want to get better at the sport and the game of football. And that, C.J. Allen basically echoed that when saying that I didn't play football for the money when I was 7 years old. They were playing because they love football, or because their parents made them play football, or whatever it was back when you're a little kid.
Yeah, let me say this about playing football. If you're playing football, you'd better love it, because it's an extremely physical, combative sport.
It's taxing.
It's taxing on the body for sure. He said, I mean, he talked about turnover and what I think it was 33 players. But he said, I'm really excited. This group has worked really hard. We've had a bunch of time to spend together. It feels like, this is me typing it as we go, by the way. So I'm sure there are some mistakes in what I'm saying. It feels like there are more new players than ever before, but the numbers don't say that. It feels like that. He said, things are turning over more and quicker. But then he shifted immediately and started talking about Georgia's ability, or his program's ability, to be stable. He said, we pride ourselves on retention and stability. They're returning all the head coaches, some of the folks watching, all the assistant coaches, all the fans watching this might not be super excited about that. And then he went on to say, too,
well, about the coaching staff, he said I think they have the best coaching staff in the country.
He said, yes, here it is right here. I have the best staff in the country. I have no doubt about that. He take that, Jim from Duluth, or where, I don't mean
that's partially him talking to all the fans
of course
that are criticizing Mike Bobo, and it was a question about Bobo that prompted him to say
Dasher. If Anthony were going to ask it, I was going to ask it, but Anthony, got the microphone, and good, because what Anthony, or what we call him Dash. What Dash said is, hey, Paul Feinbaum said something about it, and I can't remember if he said anything else about as it relates to that, but it is a good question, and I think it was a question that needs to be asked. What I would have asked, Dash asked it the way he would have. I just would have been point blank. Why is Mike Bobo why do you feel comfortable with Mike Bobo being your offensive coordinator? And he answered it when he was talking about Dash. He said, I don't feel like, he said, I have the best staff in the country, and I have no doubt about that.
Yeah, it wasn't I think this, I believe this. It's what he thinks it's what Kirby thinks he knows, or what he knows.
Yeah, and if Kirby is so it's got to be, it can't be both, Ryan. It can't, and I guess he's got to be given some grace here because the guy's won 2 national championships and won 50-something games this decade. Or 60? I don't even know what it is. A lot. It's possible that he has a blind spot for his longtime friend. It's also possible he thinks his longtime friend is the best guy to call plays. I don't know which it is.
I mean, either possible.
Who knows? Who knows?
If Kirby really, really thought that there was someone out there better that was not just out there better, but someone out there better that he could also bring to Georgia, do you not think that he would have done that? I mean, first and foremost, what he cares about is winning.
Yep.
And he's shown that over and over. And I don't think that – I just don't know that loyalty to a friend would blend in there, especially when Kirby was under Saban for such a long time and saw how, look, you're in or you're out if things are working.
It's very much
so
Project
he learned
Runway.
that. He learned that. And I just don't think that it would be that way. So –
But how could we be wrong? How
we watched the offense struggle this year with a completely different
second
unit.
year in a row. But the thing about it is, Ryan, they scored 40 point whatever points a game in 2023.
Yep.
They scored a lot of points.
Yep.
The coordinator at the time was Mike Bobo. There was not a deficiency at that moment. And people say, well, they struggled to score against Alabama. Yeah, so did everybody. I mean, so against Alabama, the offense under the previous offensive coordinator, I can't believe I've forgotten his name. Todd Monken. Under Todd Monken, Georgia never scored 30 points on offense against Alabama. They scored 24 in in Tuscaloosa and 20.
Mm-hmm.
In 21 in the SEC championship, I think they scored 17. In the national championship game, they scored 26 on offense. So, the discussion that he failed against Alabama, well, yeah, him and everybody else, it wasn't just Mike, but this ignores the 50-whatever points it was against Ole Miss, what they did to Kentucky, which was scary, the 40-plus points against Florida, and on down the line. I can't remember all the scores from 2023, but they were pretty decisive. I mean, what they did to Tennessee on the road was pretty sick.
65 against Florida State or whatever it was.
63, whatever it was, 60, I don't know.
60-something.
But there's no doubt that there's no question that it regressed. You'd have to be Ray Charles not to know that or see that. And, but all of that, I'm not here to defend Mike Bobo. My question is, what are Mike, Kirby, Stacy, and the offensive staff going to do, James Coley, what are they going to do to get back to scoring 40 points a game? I always say this, and I'll throw it to you. It starts with getting explosive players. That has started with the transfers, and you get Colby Young back. But you got to have stability on the offensive line, and the running backs have got to perform. The run game has got to perform.
Yeah, I think more than anything last year, they had so many dull moments, and there were 3 games where they scored 1 touchdown on offense. And I think they scored 10 points in each of those.
Kentucky.
13 against Kentucky.
Yeah.
And then
Kentucky.
10 against Ole Miss.
And then Notre Dame.
Yeah, so that just can't happen.
Not good enough.
And this is a reset year for Georgia in a lot of ways.
And by the way, the defense played well enough to win against Notre Dame, for sure. If not
against Ole Miss, too.
I mean, the Ole Miss game was such a blur, comparatively. I mean, they just didn't play well.
Yeah. But
period. They weren't the better team.
Not that day. And like I said, it's a reset year, and I think that people really do need to hold their judgments on Bobo and this offense for this year because, like you said, there was a common denominator between 23 and 24, and they were very different offensive seasons. Yeah. You had the same quarterback and the same offensive coordinator. Yeah. Obviously, there's a Bowers and McConkey, and I get that, and it's hard to replace that.
Well, the running backs were different.
The running backs were better. Milton and Edwards were just simply much more reliable than what they were last year. So now that you get completely new personnel, they went out and they got new toys for what will probably be Gunnar Stockton to sling it around to, a guy that is very close and familiar with Mike Bobo, and interested to see when there's an off season of work where he's likely. This is under assumption that he ends up being the quarterback, but where
he didn't answer that question.
He was vague about that, and we'll get to that probably in another conversation. But this is an opportunity to fix what happened last season and to get better on offense. It's going to be tough again. They probably aren't going to go 12-0 in the regular season. They've got tough road games along with probably the toughest home schedule now. They had the toughest road schedule last year. Now they got the toughest home schedule in college football.
Toughest home for a while.
Yep.
15, I think, was halfway difficult at home. They had Alabama, and I can't remember who else. But look, we were talking with Mackenzie last
Brooks.
name from CBS the other day. The only game that Georgia's not going to be favored in, and they probably will still be favored in, is Texas. So, they'll probably, this is going on what I said, they'll probably be 5-point favorite against Alabama, something like that. Might be more. Alabama's going to have a hard time winning in Athens. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Texas, they might. I don't know. But, Ole Miss is one thing that Mackenzie was exactly correct about and kind of drove home, because it's different when you have people that are not Dean, Ryan, and Matt talking about it. And, she's coming from a different perspective. She's coming from more 35, 40,000 foot. She was like, hey, man, everybody's changed. Tennessee, Texas, Ohio State, everybody's changed. Clemson is the team that is bringing back the most. Clemson, Georgia would be a closer game this time. I think Clemson could win that game more often than I did last year. I don't know that I'd pick them. I don't know. But they have a lot coming back. Penn State has a lot coming back. I don't trust either of those situations more than I trust Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, just because of their situation. Alabama has changes. Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Ohio State. I mean, you name it, they got changes.
All of them. All of the major players in this thing are losing one of their 2 or 3 best players from the last season, if not all of those guys.
Here's one thing that she said, too, that I think that was so interesting. If you didn't watch it, go back and watch what we had with Mackenzie from CBS. One thing that she was saying was they try to do predictive stuff for, betting models and so forth. And she was correcting things as they went. She said the one thing that we picked up on more than anything else is how different the teams are. You can't trust a team from one year to the next because of all of the turnover. And it's like, yeah, that's obvious. No, it's not as obvious as it may seem sometimes. And, for all of the hand-wringing and Larry Munsoning of Georgia fans right now, you have to remember everybody else has got to get out there and change too. And, would you rather be changing like Georgia or changing like Florida? Or Florida? I mean, look at the change Florida State had from one year to the next. So, I think with Kirby and them, the structure of this thing, the 2x4s, the bolts, that part has got to continue to be the best part of this program. He doesn't seem to be having doubt about that part.
No.
But my question, criticism, confusion, whatever you want to call it, is what about the vanilla and sprinkles on top? The cherry on top of the sundae. That was missing last year. Well, actually, some of the nuts and bolts were missing too. They've got to get the offensive line right. The defense, I think, will not look the same way in the fall as it does in the spring because you've got just too many guys missing.
Yeah, with a couple of the offensive linemen kind of limited this spring or out.
Yeah, it's not going to help.
It's not going to help, but they'll be able to develop. Got a couple of really good offensive line classes in recruiting the last couple of years. And this is an opportunity for them to get a lot of reps, to play in those scrimmages on these Saturdays, play in G-Day, which Kirby wasn't 100% is going to happen. But I think it's going to happen.
He was just hedging.
He was hard. But it's an opportunity. This is what spring is. It's an opportunity to figure out what they have. And it's the first chance that all these new players are going to be able to get the pads on and start meshing together. So we're going to get to see some of it on Thursday and try to give you as much as I possibly can from that, from the 15-minute stretch session we're probably going to get. But
such a hater. You're such a hater.
I'm just calling it how I see it, man. And that's how it is. But the run game / offensive line is going to help the pass game flourish this coming season.
If it works.
Last year, Georgia was so reliant on and they got down in some of these games. Carson Beck's thrown for 50 times in some of these games.
It's just way too
If he didn't get hurt, he was going to shatter the Georgia pass attempts record. He was going to shatter it. And he would have beaten it in that 13th game when Stetson broke that record in 15 games. So they were so reliant on throwing the ball, and even that wasn't working all the time.
No.
Because no one feared their run game.
Yeah, I don't know. But stay tuned with us. Tomorrow we're going to have Ryan's report from Butts. I should call Butts from the Woodruff practice fields. But It's
We have pro day tomorrow.
Excuse me, I misspoke.
Yeah,
yes.
pro day first,
Excuse
and then
me.
Thursday
I
we'll
misspoke.
talk about practice.
Thursday we'll talk about practice, but it's just one of these things where as many reps as they can get, now's the time to do it, and I think it's an important spring for the Georgia Bulldogs. Thanks for watching.